What's up guys, welcome back. This is Anime Crossover. You'll be watching What If Naruto Was the Emperor of Elements, in the Avatar Part 16. Now, let's begin. Ba Sing Se. The Palace of the Earth King. Roku. The expansive hall accommodated elegantly attired guests. It appeared that individuals were competing to surpass one another with their attire, with some ensembles being so elaborate that they approached the realm of ostentation. The situation was somewhat improved by the consistency of color. Everyone was attired in various shades of green, with numerous striking lime tones present as well. The official segment of the wedding ceremony for the two individuals in love had just concluded an hour prior. The daughter of Earth King Lao and the renowned Roku has entered into matrimony. The event was significant, featuring a large number of attendees from the capital as well as various provinces. A minor discord was evident at the table adjacent to Lao and Poppy. Their distinctive indigo clothing and unique skin tones set them apart. Not the sun-kissed hue typical of Earth Kingdom residents, but something altogether different. Had Lao not introduced them at the beginning of the celebration, it would have been difficult to discern that the pair, a mature yet attractive woman and a handsome, charismatic man, were the former rulers of the Northern Water Tribe. "It is quite pleasant," I remarked with a subtle smile, casting a glance at my parents, who were currently enjoying the company of Toph's parents. It was a pleasure to see Arnook and June here. No one had informed me, which was reasonable. Otherwise, there would have been no element of surprise. The proposal to invite my parents originated from my bride, and Lao demonstrated his support for his daughter by dispatching his fastest ship for their arrival. My parents informed me that they would be taking a vacation to a lovely resort. I will express my gratitude to her appropriately this evening. This time, my gaze intently tracked Toph. Even with her conservative and modest attire, she continued to be equally captivating. It was not solely my admiration that was directed towards her. Numerous young men found themselves captivated by her presence. Determining the sincerity of individuals' feelings versus their ambition for significant career advancement is challenging. After all, pursuing a relationship with Toph could potentially position one in proximity to the throne. Due to Toph's constant presence, none of the young men were able to approach her. I find it unlikely that Toph would engage in conversation with an unfamiliar individual. As I transitioned from one group to another, I made an effort to engage with each person. This is the accepted practice. The groom is expected to circulate and extend greetings to all the invited gentlemen. Fortunately, Toph managed the women's side effectively. "How are you, Jin? Take some time to unwind. Omashu will manage just fine without you for 3 days," I remarked, giving the new king of Omashu a reassuring pat on the shoulder. In comparison to Bumi and me, he did not make a significant impression. With average looks, strict glasses perched on his nose, and neatly pressed formal attire, Jin maintains a perpetually stern expression. This unassuming yet highly accountable young man emerged as the most suitable candidate for the throne of the city-state several years prior. And I was indeed correct. He was destined for this role. His sole imperfection, though it may also be considered a virtue, is his exceptional attention to detail and unwavering commitment to the letter of the law. "I certainly hope so," he responded, adjusting his glasses while he continued to review some documents. "This workaholic will remain unchanged," I murmured. The wedding extended into the late hours of the evening, and without my Kai, I would have been at a loss for words. I have never engaged in conversation to this extent before. However, as soon as Toph and I entered our room, the fatigue dissipated. I have anticipated this moment for several years. The blind earthbender exhibited an unexpected level of shyness. She enjoys observing, but challenges emerge when it pertains to her. I was unable to influence the situation. She required time to acclimate to intimate acts. I have dedicated the past 3 years to that project. The results have been notably successful, as Toph is currently performing exceptionally well. After Toph and Naruto concluded their engagement, Naruto perceived that the maids were aware of the situation occurring here. "It appears that my name will acquire a new designation that will undoubtedly cause me some frustration," I reflected as several servants had been listening outside our door for several minutes. While I am indifferent to their presence, this situation will inevitably lead to unwarranted speculation and exaggeration. The Spirit Realm. Naruto. Several plans that appeared to be non-urgent were required to be postponed on short notice. The 6th chakra has recently revealed its presence. I could have exercised patience, but my desire to grow stronger was overwhelming. Furthermore, even a partially opened chakra was exceedingly intolerable. There was no discomfort, but each moment was accompanied by the sensation of an impending sneeze that ultimately did not materialize. The experience was manageable, yet the circumstances were exceedingly stressful. I now comprehend why the records indicated numerous practitioners with 2 or 3 open chakras, yet only a handful reached the ultimate door. One could easily lose their sanity remaining in that state for an extended period. They would undoubtedly be compelled to open the chakra, even at the risk of significant peril. I have chosen to proceed without further delay. In a region untainted by Vadu's influence and devoid of any aggressive spirits, 4 identical figures conducted their activities. Indeed, this time, the chakra opening will take place within a single body. That is what my intuition indicated. In such instances, I place my trust in it completely, as approaching the final chakra entails more stringent requirements. As I wiped the perspiration from my forehead, I turned my attention to Agni, the firebending spirit positioned nearby. The warmth emanating from his physique effortlessly permeated our energy-augmented forms. Juan had achieved success in merging with the ancient spirit, thereby acquiring a fragment of its wisdom. Agni warrants respect for his remarkable patience. Not everyone can tolerate the persistent buzzing in their ear from an unfamiliar individual. However, he refrained from retaliating, choosing instead to articulate his discontent with the neighbor's behavior verbally. What is particularly noteworthy is that Agni embodies the essence of a firebending spirit, characterized by an inherent excitement and a touch of volatility. 4 of them. Agni remarked with a sense of dismay. Inform any other ancient spirit that the great Agni was outtalked by a hybrid of spirit and human, and they would find it hard to believe. I should have taken the opportunity to escape while it was still available. Initially, he consented to a close merger, and now he finds himself being utilized as a substantial source of heat. A significant acquisition. I found myself continually reflecting on our serendipitous meeting with Agni. During that period, it was Wan Shi Tong who provided me with the approximate location of the ancient firebending spirit. He stated that Agni had been operating on inertia for years, and the world was on the verge of losing one of its most formidable light spirits. The spirit of knowledge did not desire that outcome, although it was evident that the great owl's sincere concern was concealed by a pragmatic approach. His intentions were made clear when he strongly suggested that I should find a way to awaken Agni. Had he not referenced Agni's tranquil disposition, I would not have taken such decisive action. Seek out additional individuals. Ko the Face Stealer and Vatu are quite sufficient for my needs. I believe that concludes my work, I stated, fatigued, as I surveyed the substantial cauldron I had been meticulously crafting for the past 2 hours. This cauldron possessed a unique narrative. To effectively open the new chakra, additional tools are required. The vessel in which I will absorb the essence of ancient plants is of utmost importance. Therefore, another important aspect is that the intensity of the fire directly correlates with the depth of my transformation. Agni's hands will function as the fuel supporting the cauldron. I question whether there exists a more formidable fire in this world. The flame of the ancient spirit possesses the ability to melt even the most resilient human alloys, leading my attention to the intriguing aspects of the spirit world. Meteoritic iron, commonly referred to by humans as earthbending iron. For an extended period, I found the 2 names to be perplexing, as Wan Shi Tong's library exclusively referenced earthbending iron, which led me to believe they were distinct minerals. I needed to investigate further, as the rationale behind the human name truly piqued my interest. The initial recorded occurrence of this ore was found to align with a meteor shower in a historical year. It is conceivable that such a metal exists within the universe. However, as per the spirit of knowledge, almost all earthbending iron that enters the human world is a result of micro-glitches in the divider of worlds. It is referred to as earthbending due to its ability to enhance properties by absorbing surrounding spiritual energy, which is the essence of bending. This illustrates why individuals such as Master Piandao can effectively engage with it. In the human realm, there is insufficient energy for the iron to become overly willful. However, I was required to contend with the definitive king, which had absorbed a substantial amount of energy. Let's proceed, I stated with assurance, adding water to the cauldron and integrating with all my forms. Subsequently, I proceeded to lower the ancient plants into the water with great care. It gradually began to bubble and transform into a rich green hue. The aromas permeating the atmosphere were exceptional. At certain moments, it seemed as though I had never experienced having a nose until this point. Removing my drenched garments, I commenced my descent into the effervescent green mixture. The firebending spirit displayed a noticeable sense of unease. He demonstrates a commendable disposition. Despite our limited acquaintance, he is already expressing concern. With a slight smile directed at Agni, I readied myself for the commencement. The sixth chakra is situated at the center of the forehead and is obstructed by illusions. I will probably need to navigate through them. I will not yield to illusions, I commenced, imbuing my words with vitality, fully aligned with Guru Pathik's approach. Following several attempts to engage with the sixth chakra, it opened fully, as though it had been anticipating my presence for some time. Suddenly, my thoughts became unclear and fleeting. I was accustomed to having to hit the doors numerous times before they would open. Do not yield to false perceptions, I nearly exclaimed to myself as my awareness became progressively obscured. Suddenly, I experienced a significant impact on my head and the environment around me transformed. In the initial moments, I continued to resist the visions that were imposed upon me, but then, what was I thinking about? Contemplated the man whose decisions shaped the destinies of countless individuals. I found myself reflecting on something of great significance. Asterisk. Perhaps I'll recall it later. I set aside those fleeting thoughts and concentrated on engaging with my children. Life without Vadu has significantly improved, I remarked to my young ones, who were persistently attempting to explore objects with their mouths. The confrontation with the Great Spirit took place a few years prior, culminating in our success. Despite the loss of numerous warriors and light spirits, life continued to progress. My elder daughters impressed me with their accomplishments, while the younger ones amused me with their playful antics. Individuals have come to recognize my various identities and my substantial contributions to our success, ultimately resulting in my ascension to the Earth King's throne. An esteemed figure was urgently required to avert potential errors. Despite my best efforts, only approximately 20% of the warriors made it back home. The individuals yearned for retribution, and numerous others remained skeptical about the existence of a certain spirit's threat. Over time, I successfully calmed the individuals, and my authority significantly increased. "Dear, please join us at the table," called Ursa, who had not only maintained her previous beauty but had somehow elevated it further. As I sat at the table, absorbing the joyful conversations of my family and observing their content expressions, I recognized this as a genuine experience of life. I could have remained at that table indefinitely. Our large family experienced no disturbances, and each day was characterized by a profound sense of fulfillment. "Look, Dad. Someone is engaging in Agni Kai once more," pointed out Ki, now matured. Individuals frequently convened in that location to demonstrate their martial abilities or mastery of elemental forces. Agni? I found myself unexpectedly pausing at that term. The subsequent week. Cease the excessive pouring. A man struck the counter. This is not feasible. I assure you for the umpteenth time, this is authentic 200-year-old ginseng. To enhance their credibility, they presented a partially open box containing the plant to the man. Ginseng? The term unexpectedly escaped my lips. That evening, I observed the expressions of my wives and noted a distinct absence of former warmth. I found my thoughts unappealing, yet the situation still reeked of insincerity. At that moment, I experienced a significant throbbing in my head, and reality appeared to regain its clarity. "No," I exclaimed emphatically, attempting to dispel the sensation of losing command over my circumstances. "Are you all right, Naruto?" Agni's voice came through muffled, as if filtered by cotton. "Please share your thoughts." This moment was not suitable for him. Before I had a chance to contemplate my potentially serious situation, my body commenced a process of reassembly, a term that accurately describes the transformations taking place within me. The events unfolded rapidly, leaving me unable to fully grasp the transformation occurring around me. The source exhibited fluctuations in size, alternating between expansion and contraction, while simultaneously increasing in density at an exponential rate. The channels continuously evolved, deepening and expanding with each passing moment until they fully encompassed my body. A double energy body, a thought emerged as I redirected my attention to the current transformations. It became increasingly intense. The sixth chakra engaged with my genome, meticulously exploring my hereditary information. Modifications were made in certain areas, with additions in some places and complete removals in others. Each instance elicited responses of euphoria from my body, indicating that all aspects were advantageous. The duration concluded after approximately 5 minutes. Upon opening my eyes, a strong aroma immediately engaged my senses, making a distinct impression. The unpleasant odor emanated from the dark substance that enveloped my entire body. Welcome to the journey of a Kai cultivator refining their physical form. In an effort to soothe my spirit, I commenced a thorough cleansing, despite my inclination to simply rest on the ground. I experienced a profound transformation. During my tidying up, I observed that my body's proportions had undergone some subtle changes, not significant, but noticeable nonetheless. For instance, my balance has shown improvement. There were numerous subtle details, as if my body had been honed to a specific level of excellence. With my fist clenched, I sensed the formidable strength contained within what appeared to be a fragile hand. In addition to physical attributes, I have developed enhanced control over my Kai. It was entirely anticipated, as channels play a significant role, and I now represent a substantial channel. Techniques utilizing Kai have become considerably more accessible and efficient. By employing the technique of the Yu-Yan archers, I can propel myself off the air, thereby generating a relatively solid surface from Kai. This will offer numerous benefits in combat, particularly when executing sharp turns during flight. I engaged in this activity throughout the day until my body signaled that the chakra opening had taken its toll, indicating that I required some rest. At that point, I recognized that my mental fatigue surpassed my physical exhaustion. Those illusions had significantly burdened my awareness. On that particular night, I experienced an unusual dream. Upon the successful activation of the sixth chakra, an elderly man with gray hair emerged, riding on a flying bison. His overall demeanor exuded the essence of a skilled waterbender. Long, flowing hair, eyes that conveyed deep wisdom, and attire that reflected the rich traditions of the ancient water tribe. "Excellent work, young man," he acknowledged with a nod of approval. "Achieving the sixth mortal rank in this energy-scarce world." His tone suggested admiration, yet it carried an air of superiority, akin to addressing an insignificant creature. "A dedicated student is essential in our northern water tribe. An invisible force compelled me, leaving me with no alternative. Consider spending a year in the outer courtyard, and you may develop into the inner courtyard." He proceeded to fly around Agni, who, similar to me, was unable to move. He expressed his admiration for the firebending spirit, mentioning a new spiritual weapon emerging within their tribe. It appeared they intended to encapsulate the spirit within a sword. After that, my memory becomes unclear. I regained consciousness. I experienced some unsettling thoughts I expressed throughout the day, remaining alert and observant. What if an extraordinarily powerful waterbender were to breach the fabric of space and arrive here? I certainly do not wish to seek refuge in a cave. Ani provided a welcome distraction, opting to evaluate my enhanced capabilities. I fully consented to this initiative. "An impressive display of strength," Agni remarked with a touch of admiration after my fist made contact with his leg. "The power behind that strike was entirely derived from Kai." Merely a feeble ancient," the spirit remarked with sincere appreciation during the subsequent encounter. "When I utilize all my strength, whether neutral or Kai, I can engage in sparring with a weaker spirit and have a favorable chance of success," I reflected. The shifting visage of the face stealer no longer appeared as daunting. "Acknowledging my capabilities has reinstated my previous confidence. I will refrain from seeking out Ko for the time being. I am still not adequately prepared. It is essential to enhance my odds of triumph, and first, I must comprehend the limitations of my newfound abilities. It appears that the sixth chakra has intensified all the others. At the very least, my senses are functioning even more effectively. Diligent practice and thorough research are imperative." The spirit world. A serene meadow. Naruto Roku Wan Yo. For an entire week, I have engaged in various activities, all while maintaining the appearance of being occupied with significant tasks. If I were not certain that I was under observation, I would have discontinued this pretense much earlier. It has been a month and a half since I activated my sixth chakra. The initial 30 days were dedicated to comprehending my newly acquired abilities. Nearly every day, I uncovered something new within myself. My resistance to toxins has significantly improved, allowing me to face even the creations of Daisy and Drea, those passionate individuals who cultivate formidable plants capable of generating toxic Kai, without fear. The life energy crystals I cultivate have significantly increased in size. My complete reserve can now yield a stone comparable to the size of a blue jay's egg, which aligns with the average dimensions of crystals found in the Valley of Two Worlds. The changes have progressively intensified, as if my body itself is imposing limitations on my enhancements to avert potential harm. A day after activating the chakra, my senses began to behave unusually. It was only later that I understood this was a form of calibration for my newly acquired abilities. I now function as a living sensor. To assess my capabilities, I engaged in a challenge with Jun's pet, determining who could locate an object or person more swiftly. Ultimately, the pet emerged victorious, but my lack of experience was evident. My olfactory receptors were inundated with a multitude of scents. Beyond the enhancements, my body felt remarkably purified. I believe these impurities significantly disrupt our lives. Here I find myself, instead of engaging in productive activities, attending to the soles of my boots in an inconspicuous location. There is a valid reason for this, and that reason is Ko. By this point, he should be sufficiently recovered to resume his pursuit of me. I preferred not to remain passive in anticipation of his unexpected assault, so 2 weeks ago, I took the initiative to draw him out. I even became a member of an inspection committee overseeing railway construction. However, it appears that eliminating just one of my bodies no longer captivates his interest. Unfortunately, I can sense his malevolent focus, heightened by my enhanced intuition. Curiously, he seems to have redirected his attention to my Roku body once more. A strategy quickly developed in my mind, one with a reasonable likelihood of drawing the face stealer's attention. As time passed, this concept appeared increasingly valuable. Even if Ko confronted me in the human realm, I wouldn't be able to defeat him in a single blow. Once he detected any threat, he would retreat to the spirit world, a place where I would likely lose track of him. However, in the spirit world, he would not evade me. His energy would be heightened, and in the human realm, he would face inevitable demise. For this strategy, I required Wan Shi Tong's Kai scrolls, simple tools to deceive the spirit into believing that preparations were in progress. Additionally, one, accidentally, overheard conversation would be essential. Earth King's Palace, Ba Sing Se. Roku. 1 week prior. The underground tunnels beneath the palace, which date back centuries, contain numerous secrets. They include a small prison capable of holding 30 to 40 individuals, adequate barracks, and a concealed room designated for confidential negotiations. Lao and I engaged in conversation, initially focusing on matters of significant importance, topics suitable for discussion in his office over tea. However, we required some time to pass until the arrival of a special guest, and here he is. I gently closed my eyes, indicating to Lao that Ko had arrived. The spirit's intellect, despite the influence of Vachu's energy, functioned exceptionally well. Initially, I was unaware of being observed. It became apparent that Ko had transformed himself into a centipede. Once more, he nearly outwitted me, yet even the smallest of creatures possesses a faint spark of life. The bait was accepted. The face stealer could not overlook a clandestine discussion between two significant individuals, particularly one conducted in a concealed location. I will need to depart from the human realm for a week, I stated, adhering to the established script. There is an increase in the activity of dark spirits, I continued, remaining truthful. Wan Shi Tong has requested that I devise a trap aimed at substantially decreasing the numbers of lesser and mid-level spirits. While it may not be effective on more robust options, it is a step forward. If successful, we will position them along routes leading to the settlements of light spirits. You wouldn't interrupt me for such a trivial issue, Lao stated, maintaining a facade of calm. However, it was evident that he was quite anxious. How could he not be? Just beyond the cracks, mere meters away, resided an ancient spirit, one capable of ending his life without a second thought. All 4 of my bodies will be absent, I stated, prompting a slight reaction from someone nearby. We are undertaking this for you, Ko. Value it while the opportunity exists. The chat then shifted back to politics and finished 5 minutes later. Spirit world. Present. Almost done, I yelled loudly, expecting to finally elicit a response. The phony knowledge spirit scrolls were almost done. Movement detected. My brain went into overdrive, and life and neutral energy flowed through my entire body. I had to lay all of my cards on the table. This wasn't a game to play against. In less than a second, a little Ko emerged from the long grass and immediately grew bigger. Come on. Was spending 500 hours in a virtual room battling the face stealer for nothing? What other tasks could I undertake? Back then, I felt powerless and tried to ignore my feelings of weakness. Honestly, it didn't go well. Ko always beat me, but his every move was seared in my memory. Of course, I am not so consumed with vengeance that I have lost my mind. Drea has been warned and is ready to assist whenever needed. Her portal bending ability allows any of my bodies to reach her, Right now, my elemental bending is ineffective. It cannot even scratch Ko. As a result, it is preferable to have all 4 bodies, each with its own set of skills supplied by life energy and open chakra. Naruto me quickly started making golden ribbons to bind the centipede. That body will not participate in close combat since its pockets are full of life energy crystals. Roku me stood right in front of the charging spirit. With a short surge of earthbending, my entire body sank below the ground, only to emerge behind Ko moments later. I could see his movements and react to them in real time. A long, pointy bone protruded from my hand and swiftly implanted itself in Ko's body. RRRRR. He let out a true growl, a painful one, as I noticed. That hardened me. This struggle was not one-sided. My joy was short-lived. The lower portion of his body shoved me away, jarring my organs even though my bones protected my internal organs. He'll arch his body back to lunge forward, I imagined. Most of his strikes were similar, but the issue was reacting in time. Soon, Ko was caught in yellow-green ribbons packed with a lot of pleasant and life force. I gained several seconds. Without hesitation, 2 of my bodies rushed in and ripped off his legs. "I'll kill you," Ko shouted, engulfed in dark red smoke and visibly stealing Vachu's chaotic might. The restricting ribbons went suddenly, and his body whirled violently. "Crystal," Yomi exclaimed mentally, receding and watching as my right hand slipped into Ko's mouth. Growing a new limb would take 2 to 3 minutes, but with life energy crystals, regeneration would be far faster. The following 5 minutes seemed like hours. New, slowly healing wounds emerged on my body, but mercifully no limbs were severed again. Ko grabbed my body, preparing to bite my head off, but I shattered a green stone in my hand, transferring all available life energy into fast-developing bones that saved my life. My ability to stretch my body was quite beneficial. It allowed me to avoid about half of his attacks. Using the crystals to remove Vachu's dark energy shield depleted them rapidly. Only then could I cause significant damage to his body. Despite the confusion, Vachu's energy transformed the spirit into a mindless, violent beast, rather than adding sanity. Unfortunately, this did not affect the general issue. Eventually, my crystals and reserves would run out, forcing me to flee. I didn't want to let Ko go. There might not be another chance. When he recovered and recognized the danger he'd been in, he became 10, if not 100, times more cautious. Without saying anything, one of my bodies vanished from sight, only to resurface moments later alongside Drea. Ko didn't seem to notice another spirit's approach. "Hold on for another 30 seconds, she advised, completely concentrated on developing a technique. After 30 seconds, powerful trees sprouted around her, displaying Drea's special skill, vampirism. My wife didn't just stand still, she quickly modified her skill to new shapes. The tree roots gradually entwined Ko's body. A tree might be reduced to dust in only seconds. Drea's trees were murdered by absorbing greatly diluted Vachu energy, as even a small amount constituted a major threat to an ancient spirit. The countless scars on my body showed it. Closing the wounds required 1, sometimes 2, life energy stones. Ko was marinated in the extraction of Vachu's energy, which took 15 minutes. By the conclusion, his former clarity had returned, and his body language indicated a desire to depart as quickly as possible. 5 minutes later, "I'm ready to join your side. Vachu forced me to hunt you." When the face stealer realized he couldn't flee, he instantly begged forgiveness. There was no other outcome. During our combat, he lost his energy reserves and had to rely on Vachu's energy. The badly weakened Ko simply couldn't take on 5 intellectual opponents, each with the might of a weak ancient spirit. "Only an idiot would believe your sweet talk," I explained. The bastard did not even hesitate to wear the visage of Sumi, the servant he had murdered. Nodding to Drea, all 4 of my bodies restrained the spirit while her tree roots gradually killed Ko. Soon, threats and appeals poured out of his mouth. He probably didn't realize how ludicrous his behavior was. After some time, the spirit completely left this realm, giving birth to a forest of pines, spruces, linden trees, and numerous other species. "Let's go home," Drea murmured after a whole 30 minutes of stillness. My mind remained utterly motionless, as if it hadn't realized that one of my most dangerous foes was no longer a threat. "Yes," I said, amazed by how brilliant the world had gotten. I could spend a month or 2 focusing on my family without worrying about power struggles. Air Island Temple. Morning. Naruto won Rokuyo. I was only able to relax a week after Ko's death. Until then, innumerable concerns concerning the Mother of Faces had tormented my thoughts. According to the records of the local Wan Shi Tong, who enjoys gathering information on even his allies, the light spirits, I knew the Mother of Faces had no touch with her son. In fact, she harbored an obvious dislike for him. According to the spirit of knowledge, the Mother of Faces came close to succumbing to the dark side but was able to conquer it by removing a fragment of dark energy from her body. That fragment would later become the Face Stealer. For some reason, she couldn't destroy the weaker spirit she had made, allowing it to escape. Over millennia, he evolved into an old spirit with distinct talents, which he used to avoid detection. I feared her dark fragment's death would damage her, prompting her to seek my attention. While I've grown powerful enough to compete with ancient spirits, who knows the Mother of Faces' actual strength? She can't be feeble if even her minuscule fraction has become a powerful ancient spirit. So far, everything appears fine. Dad, Mom, Tomoko raced into the room, climbing onto the bed where Ursa and I were still relaxing. Time to get up. Before we could react, a burst of wind blew away our covering. No personal space with kids around, I chuckled, promptly apprehending the troublemaker. Let me go. She giggled as I began tickling her. The moment we leave the palace, all your manners vanish, Ursa grumbled, carefully slipping out of bed. The previous night's actions had caused a delightful discomfort in her lower body. I don't like the palace, Tomoko stated firmly, pushing out her cheeks. I don't think Azula would mind if you stayed here, I added, ruffling my daughter's hair. Honestly, it's long overdue to get you out of that cesspool. Tomoko's birth did not coincide with Ozai's death. Therefore everyone knew Ursa was carrying another man's child. Azula and I had been married by that point, so I was the prince consort. People had long noticed our close, perhaps too close, relationship with Ursa, so connecting the dots wasn't difficult. There was no turmoil. Everyone was aware of my power. Yet, rumors and gossip flowed throughout the palace and beyond. Azula hushed the biggest voices, revealing what happened to those who spoke up. Nonetheless, the stares never stopped. As a result, Tomoko lacked genuine friendships. You'll study with Shika, I told my daughter, squeezing her warmly. Convincing Azula was difficult. She adored her niece and did not want to part with her for long. Even the most stubborn intellect could understand that the palace atmosphere, particularly for Tomoko, was unsuitable for a growing youngster. Even Zuko, who rarely visits his homeland, concurred. It's a shame cameras are still in development. I'd love to have captured Zuko-Azu's expression when he discovered he had a younger sister. He gave birth to his own child a year ago, who would one day become Yu Dao's mayor. That experience seems to force Iroh to move in with his nephew. It appears that the Dragon of the West has finally fulfilled one of his ambitions. For months, stories have circulated throughout the Earth Kingdom about a new tea house called Jasmine Dragon. A few months later, training grounds for the Air Island Temple. Today's lesson is about control, I told my students, building a stone stool using earthbending and sitting on it. Shizuka, Jun, and Ursa were intently watching me. Our children stood slightly ahead of them, looking down on their mothers with a sense of superiority. After all, they were better benders. Their small heads forgot that their mothers had only recently learned to bend. I had long desired to give my wife bending powers. As I usually say, situations change, and you never know what to expect. It's great if they have their own elements. With the globe at peace, Vachu's fragment missing, Ko gone, and Tianhai's crime wave slowing, now is a good time to reinforce my loved ones. Besides, my Kai isn't my strongest instrument now. The life force flowing through me provides me enough assurance that my inner circle is secure. Ursa unlocked airbending, Shizuka earthbending, and Jun stunned everyone with his firebending abilities. Mei and Tai Li are up next, and they will also need to bend. They would be helpless in the face of an aggressive spirit. I believe my student population will rise in the next months. My healing time has shortened to a month. I can go 2 more months without bending. You're lost in thought again, dear, Ursa stated via the mental link. Start explaining already, Shizuka exclaimed too loudly. She's still adjusting to this new style of communication. When too many people with similar connections meet, the channel becomes clogged with voices, making it difficult to determine who is speaking. What separates a master from a student isn't the number of techniques or the scale of moves, but control, I told the girls. My wives are grown and understand, but the girls still like to strike hard. I won't disagree that there are times when that approach is necessary, but not always. 2 hours later, Chitara entered the training area, stretching seductively. I couldn't take my gaze away from her huge assets and beautiful posterior, which I find captivating. That devil knows how excited I am, and she takes advantage of it. My wife doesn't mind Chitara, but they still keep an eye on her. "Hi, everyone," she said brightly, approaching us. I'm also teaching her bending, but someone loves to relax in the sun, so our sessions are inconsistent. "Hi," the youngsters exclaimed. She has obviously captured their hearts, and the frisky cat adores spending time with them. "Stupid cat," Jun murmured when Chitara's tail tip touched her nose. There is no actual hatred between them, although Jun loathed Chitara from the beginning. Seeing Jun's reaction, the spirit continued to tease the former mercenary. One night, I asked Jun about her feelings regarding Chitara. It turns out that the trouble originated in her early infancy. With a father who collects animals, their house was like a petting zoo. Many of the animals in his collection were small enough to fit in their spacious home. Needless to say, such neighbors are not desirable. Her youth was characterized by torn clothes and strewn items. The cats were the worst, including cat owls, whiskered cats, dwarf pumas, and ordinary house cats. There are innumerable cat species in the world, therefore their house was full of them. For as long as she could remember, they had been at war, and her father was not always on her side. Once, I persuaded Jun to take me to her parents' house. Her father was a strange individual. He clearly loved his daughter, although from a distance. Later, Jun told me that her father was still grieving for her mother, who died after childbirth. Jun began to resemble her mother more. It's possible that her father saw his lost love in her, reopening old scars. I believe that is why he pursued his hobby, to spend less time with his kid. Jun knew very little about her mother, and her father rarely discussed their past. My curiosity drove me to explore Wan Shi Tong's library, which now replicates even the most sensitive information. Several of my suspicions were confirmed. Jun's mother was born on the Fire Nation Islands and was formerly an aristocrat. Her family failed to establish itself in the Serpentarium, and, as is often the case, they became inconvenient. They were probably merely puppets in a political game between stronger families. In the end, only Jun's mother lived. Jun appears to be from the Fire Nation, as seen by her skin tone and eye shape, despite being born in the Earth Kingdom. The session continued in a happy atmosphere, owing to Jun and Chitara's humor, as well as the little benders who hilariously supported their mothers. Tianhai. Police headquarters. Conference hall. Thousands of officers assembled in the big conference hall, not understanding why. Countless silent voices produced a solemn hum. The most senior officials sat in the front, with lower-ranking officers occupying the seats behind them. Soon, General Shen, a character tolerated by both firebenders and earthbenders, took the stage. Back when he was a Fire Nation commander, he was neutral, if not slightly positive, toward enemy citizens. "From now on, you must attend this hall weekly," his aged but powerful voice bellowed. "To avoid disrupting main duties, each department will have its own schedule. Listen carefully, that's all." He walked away, making room for an unfamiliar man. "Each meeting will begin with me reading Tianhai's moral and ethical police code." The man's rich voice boomed through the auditorium, nearly mesmerizing those who listened. It was difficult not to want to hear him again. "I consider it my duty to serve humanity, to protect peaceful citizens from violence and disorder, to defend them." No one spoke, and everyone in the audience appeared riveted. "From what I've heard, the Dai Li did something similar," a rookie officer reflected. "The tone, speed, and volume. It's a form of hypnosis. Soon, the minds of these officers will have subtle implants, helping them be true policemen. It's genius. While it won't stop the utterly corrupt, it will highlight the truly rotten apples against the proper officers." Cheng paid attention to every detail. Many would describe his talents as a gift. With a glance, he could determine a person's occupation, previous actions, and a plethora of other knowledge that remained in his memory indefinitely. But he referred to his excellent memory and strong deduction as curses. At first, they helped him survive. Otherwise, he would not have been able to provide for and clothe his sister after their parents perished in Ba Sing Se's lowest ring. Trading information generated enough money for fresh bread and milk. Cheng understood what and to whom he could communicate. He never disclosed his full powers, otherwise, he would have been recruited into a gang. No, He intended to marry off his sister gently and start his own family. Unfortunately, not every desire comes true. At some point, a new gang appeared in their neighborhood, unafraid of even the most sinister tasks. Typical goons who would be eliminated by rival gangs in a matter of months. Even the criminal underground has rules. Break them, and you become a common enemy. It would have been preferable if he hadn't worked those days, but he was excited to surprise his younger sister on her birthday. He needed money. The goons became interested in him, as if he were a character in a cheap detective fiction. He did not consider himself a great fighter, so he quickly consented to join their gang. Better that than dying. Who would care for his little sister? On that day, thugs entered his small refuge and offered him a spot in their gang, omitting one detail. Every gang member endures a break. They locate your weakness and brutally destroy it. They instantly identified his vulnerable point. Damnable benders. He squeezed his hands, making them hurt. Although only the gang boss and his right-hand man were benders, Vachu's animosity led him to believe that benders equal evil. Need to calm down, he said as he began breathing exercises. He then refocused on the speaker. If he remembers everything correctly, he can attempt to reproduce this hypnosis. Their organization could certainly benefit from such a tool. Probably, other fields will do something similar. After all, it's not just cops who might be improper, but also authorities, judges, and even ordinary workers. The western portion of the Earth Kingdom. A river with waterfalls. Naruto's path. I found myself at a gorgeous location near one of the Earth Kingdom's several ports. In the animated series, Katara taught Aang waterbending using the same scroll she had stolen from pirates. I believed that shifting locations would allow me to see mastery in a new light, allowing me to advance to the next level of spiritual development. In no haste, I perched on a rock and watched the cascade. With nothing else to do, I started channeling water kai throughout my body. There were no precise ideas, simply a meditative atmosphere, and the sound of flowing water was somewhere in the background. On their own, the knowledge and understanding that I had gained from the spirits of the moon and ocean began to flow through my brain. Then they appeared to compress or consolidate. I felt something inside of me transform and become more sophisticated. Finally, the essence of my understanding sank deep within my soul, leading my body to emit not just a sea, but an ocean of water kai. The transfer to the ancient level was nearly complete. I hope Wan Shi Tong's conclusions were correct, I thought, as the entire world had turned its attention to me. It seemed like I was standing naked in front of thousands of people. These eyes would determine whether I lived or died. After what felt like hours, the strange focus of something tremendous faded away. So, he was right, I felt relieved. Individuals with powers akin to ancient spirits can develop and emerge in the human world because humans, unlike spirits, are not outsiders. Something similar occurs in the spirit world. If a live Kai practitioner does not have the same level of control that I do, their Kai will flow to the nearest green crystal deposits. Finally, I've broken through. I cried, unable to suppress a happy laugh. I could sense every single particle of water Kai, no matter how small. If it were my desire, all of the residents of the port town, who live a full kilometer distant, would become my puppets. Occasionally, a peculiar sensation occurred, as if I am the water. In the following second, my body vanished from its original place, only to return somewhere in the spirit world. I needed to put my newly acquired skills to the test. Like cutting through grass, I mumbled in amazement, since even the highest spirits appeared to be no different than the middling ones. Both might be defeated with ease. It's time to put my unique ability to the test. I flew right into the dark spirits. Their strikes were quick, but my body, tempered by life Kai, simply refused to allow the lower and mid-level spirits to inflict substantial harm. A high-ranking fire spirit sent a fireball at my body, but it just drained a droplet of my water Kai. A crab-like earth spirit nearly scraped my flesh with its claw, but it couldn't reach me because my body had split into two pieces and reassembled itself. No, to truly understand my new abilities, I need a different ancient spirit. I shook my head, progressively converting my body into water. A crystal-clear torrent of water then rushed past the spirit's feet. Feeling like a liquid was fascinating and easy to understand. As soon as I thought of it, my hand emerged from the water's surface, allowing me to move freely. I had seen something similar in the elemental nations, where members of the Hazuka clan had the same talent. As far as I could tell, as long as I possessed water Kai, physical damage could not affect my body. The same is true with Kai-based injury. That fire spirit's attack should have singed my body slightly, yet it lost almost all of its power when it came into contact with me. Now I was curious how much harm was neutralized when struck by an ancient spirit. As I approached the library entrance, I felt like the spirit of knowledge was right there, ready to greet me. "Congratulations," he said, his voice as even as ever. "Can we chat for a minute?" Hold on. Let me go first," I said, ready to dive into the whole story for him. "Sure thing," he said, and you could tell his words matched his actions perfectly. I was thinking as I splashed around in the area. So, I lost 10% of my total Kai reserve just like that, but thankfully, my body came out mostly unscathed, just a little bruise on my chest. "Oh, so that's how it goes. Okay, go ahead and say what you need to say," I said, putting myself back together. "Oh, and just to clarify, my voice definitely didn't sound offended at all. This is just what I thought Wan Shitong would be like." "Alright, let's dive into my plan to boost the number of benders," I said, pushing other thoughts aside and tuning in. "We need to bring back the lost Kai to our world. When there's more Kai around, people will just start to tap into their gifts," he said, flapping his wing. We were up there, hundreds of meters above the ocean, and the water was just sparkling with the signatures of light spirits. So, to make this happen, we'll have to create some openings between the worlds. Kai will naturally want to fill up the new vessel. Can the barrier be breached? I always saw it as something that couldn't be moved. Not by just one ancient spirit, or even 100, he said with a nod, keeping it cool. If we throw in a bender with the same power, our chances go up a lot. You know how spirits in the human world can't tap into their full strength, right? That's why I held off until you hit that ancient level. We just need to hit the barrier from both sides, right at the same spot. Looks like that's how the fire sages pulled off that crack way back when. They made the barrier weaker on their end, while a dark spirit lent a hand from the other side. So, I can already spot a bunch of issues that are likely to come up from drilling this hole. Everything's been taken care of, the spirit said, a hint of offense in its voice. The gap will be tiny, just enough for lower spirits to slip through easily. Mid-level spirits will have to put in some effort and take a bit of time. As for higher spirits, they might find themselves stuck between worlds for weeks, giving off their Kai. So, I think you'll have a chance to get ready for that kind of visit. Ancients, they're a whole different story. They might only be able to nudge the hole a bit to let in some weaker spirits. But honestly, I don't think we'll just sit around when a dark ancient spirit shows up near that hole. This is the spot where I'll hit, he said, pointing to a place close to himself. We're going to make sure each new breach happens in the safest spots. Vatu hasn't made it to the ocean just yet, and right beneath us is the biggest underwater settlement of light spirits. The hole will close up completely in about a year, and each time, we'll need to create new ones. So, based on what Wan Shitong explained, it turns out that each year, we have to add a new breach to the one we already have. This is definitely the best way to go, since making 2 or 3 holes at the same time could put regular folks at risk. Being around so many spiritual Kai particles would feel like getting way too much oxygen all at once, and it wouldn't be pleasant at all. If there's a breach in the first year, we can expect the frequency of Kai particles to go up by 1%. So, it seems like we could expect a couple of dozen new airbenders to show up, plus several hundred more from the other 3 elements. The air nomads weren't into having a lot of kids, so there aren't too many folks around who are naturally inclined to airbending. It's interesting to think about Aang being a strong supporter of polygamy, right? It feels like a topic that's becoming more relevant these days. Eventually, we found ourselves hovering over an island belonging to the Fire Nation. Oh, looks like Jiang Wei is close by. I believe the folks there ended up being relocated eventually. Sure, they might not have been the happiest, but hey, at least they were alive and healthy, and they had decent compensation to boot. This is Black Rock Island. It feels like something I know, you got it. This is the exact island where, in the animated series, the United Forces came together to launch their attack on the Fire Nation's capital. The island's pretty close to the capital, so if there's ever a spirit breakthrough, they can quickly send in forces to take care of it, I started to ponder. So I was thinking we should start building a base here. Do you think we should create the breach once we have some weapons set up? I asked, glancing at the owl. Just do it now, was the quick response. Sure, I can leave one of my bodies here to hang out until construction and troop deployment are done, I said casually. You don't need to be here, he said, shaking his head. There's already someone watching, he said, turning his head toward a deep bay where thick fog was starting to roll in. A peak-level high spirit. It was clear that the fog was definitely made by a water spirit. Before long, the very creator of the fog showed up, a stunning girl with fair skin, long black hair, and striking red markings on her face, along with delicate collarbones. The girl spirit had this cool ivory-colored dress and a big hat that made her look like a mushroom. The painted lady, I said, sharing my thoughts. Exactly that, he replied, giving a friendly nod to the spirit. After making her mark, she disappeared once more. Looks like she's not a fan of the spotlight. So, we're back to the earlier topic. Hit this point exactly 1 minute from now, he said, and just like that, he was gone. As I kept track of the time in my mind, I started to actively move around neutral and water Kai. 59, and then it's 60 seconds. I focused all my energy on one technique, a straightforward water blade, and I could feel our strikes with Wan Shi Tong coming together. Suddenly, a little crack popped up in the air, and before I knew it, it was getting bigger, big enough for me to slip right through. I could instantly sense a change in the background energy, with the particles buzzing around more energetically. I need to get in touch with Azula right away. Let's get started on building the military base as soon as we can. As soon as Wan detached from his body, he zoomed straight toward the capital. Tianai, Four Elements Hotel. In one of the fanciest spots in the city-state, a secret meeting was happening. Zaire, how's everything going? Asked an older gentleman with gray hair, looking at a man with a tough face and a shaved head. Everything's going just as we expected. Their group is going to keep expanding its influence in different areas of the state for years to come. But there's something else on my mind. The leader of the Equalists has never revealed himself. It seems like only his close associates know who he is. Sometimes, I get this feeling that some members of the organization share a strange connection, Zaire said, sounding a bit unsure. You know, the core group, the top ranks, they've never shown any disagreement, not even a tiny bit. It's just not something that happens. Don't let it get to you. Just let them do their thing, the elder said, waving his hand weakly. What matters is that we're on the same page here. Their moves are just going to stir up chaos and anarchy, and we'll be right there to stoke the fire. Eventually, these guys will see that the Order of the White Lotus was meant to stay in the shadows, keeping our world safe. He slammed his fist on the table. With the blood of the innocent, we're going to show everyone a new way forward. Ka, the elder coughed, spitting out bloody saliva that splattered right onto the pie show board. The White Lotus had a splash of crimson on it, the Order of the Red Lotus, right? I think it fits us just right. What do you think, Zaire? As the leader commands, the man said, bowing his head. When we're by ourselves, just call me by my name, the elder said, shaking his head. All right, Zai Bao, said the former member of the Order of the White Lotus, who was practically one of its founders. So, your job will be to bring in new members for the Order. Get ready to step up and lead. I have a feeling my time is running out. Quote. The Tianhai Mountains, Evening. Yakan, The city was alive and kicking even at this late hour, and there was some pretty unusual stuff happening up in the mountains too. There were these huge, long tunnels that had turned into a new hangout for a group that wasn't quite ready to show itself to everyone just yet. So, tunnel number 22 has collapsed. Thankfully, no casualties. Another report was added to the growing stack of reviewed documents. Paperwork is just unavoidable, isn't it? Yakan sighed, shaking his head as he stretched out his joints and muscles with his kai. It's interesting to see that he still had his mask on, but it didn't seem to bother him at all. The newest document went over the expenses. Creating a whole base inside a mountain drained the budget, especially since we had to keep everything under wraps. They had so few earthbenders in their group that you could count them on one hand. Sure, there were more people around, but if you leave out the troublemakers and those who might tip off the cops, only a few trusted folks were left. They had to count on Zansus connections, who were able to buy drills and other materials through proxies. So, it turns out that a lot of criminal groups, along with the businesswoman's own hefty accounts, had taken a hit. Luckily, there were still enough funds for supplies. He heard a sharp knock on the iron door and paused his thoughts. "Lieutenant," a man walked in, standing tall in a snug protective suit. He looked out at the world with a serious gaze, his green goggles covering his eyes. His long, drooping mustache was definitely the most striking thing about him. Yakin's visitor was the first person he trusted without feeling any family connection. For some reason, Zansu just felt like she was one of his own. It was tough to get into his inner circle, but this guy had definitely earned his trust. You know, the body's reactions usually tell the truth, and with those Kai blocking techniques, Yakin could tell that the lieutenant was on the same page with him. When he became part of the Equalists, the lieutenant put his past behind him, even ditching his own name. "I have a feeling it won't be too long before I can bring him on as my right-hand man," Yakin mused, looking over at the desk stacked with reports. There would be even more allies and tasks needing his focus. "Check out this list of entrepreneurs and inventors we're interested in," the lieutenant said, passing him another paper. "A few of them are definitely out. They're just too close to heads of state," Yakin said as he quickly scanned the list, crossing off half the names right away. "I don't think the others will be too keen on working with us either," the lieutenant said thoughtfully. "We can definitely guide them to make the right choice," Yakin said with a smile. "So, there's this attack on the family of some unknown benders, right? It turns the victim into someone who just hates all gifted folks." He was already starting to think about what to do next. "How's the training for the recruits coming along?" "They're not anything yet," the man said, shaking his head. "I believe we'll start seeing the first results in about 2 or 3 weeks. I want to check out their training," Yakin said, getting up from his desk and turning into Eamon as he walked through the doorway. Only the founders of the organization and the lieutenant knew his real name. The latter was never one to chat much, always getting straight to the point. The corridors had these dim lamps lighting the way, and there was trash scattered on the floor, just sitting there, waiting to be picked up. It had this eerie vibe, kind of villainous, which made Eamon crack a small half-smile. For a lot of people out there, they would definitely come off as the bad guys. After 7 minutes of quietly making their way through the base, they finally reached one of the biggest rooms. The trainees burst out with, "Ha!" all around. Non-benders, Eamon mused, reflecting on their errors. To level the playing field against benders, they needed the best weapons and gear out there. Check out the electric batons that the lieutenant handled like a pro. It took years for law enforcement to get their hands on the invention, thanks to all the red tape and safety checks that held things up. Maybe there's a good reason for that, since just a little bump in electrical power could lead to a nicely roasted body. Next up, and just as important, was physical training, which might also involve martial arts. We needed to cover our weaknesses with weapons and armor, and amp up our strengths. Eamon put in a lot of effort to track down the perfect martial arts master, and getting him to embrace his ideas was an even bigger challenge. But as he looked ahead at the thriving cells of their organization, he realized that all the hard work had truly paid off. He tried out the Kai blocking technique on himself, and even he found he couldn't bend for a few seconds. His other associates took even longer to recover. From what he gathered, it boiled down to life energy, which made it easier for him to get his power flow back on track faster. The master just used 2 fingers to block Kai, even with light armor on. His new students would need to depend on their fists for quite a while, since the odds of hitting the right spot went up a lot. They weren't sure if they could master the next level, those paralyzing strikes. Funny enough, it turned out that blocking bending abilities was simpler than actually paralyzing muscles. "I hope they can pull it off." Eamon understood that Tianhai's police and army had a mix of benders and a lot of regular folks too. In that case, Kai blocking wouldn't have any effect. "I need to set aside some time for training." Nomi Village. 2 months after the first breach between worlds, I was super excited to hear about the discovery of the first airbender. The adult man turned out to be living in one of Tianhai's feeding settlements. Nomi, a small farming village, provided almost 20% of the rice eaten each year in Tianhai. I reached out to Aang right away so he could see the first airbender come to life. About an hour later, we got closer to the settlement. "We're going down, Appa," Aang exclaimed, his voice brimming with excitement. From up here, we could see the village perfectly, tucked away in a circle of low mountains. The nearby hills had their slopes turned into terraces for growing rice. There are now tiny figures of people working there. As we landed in the village center and stirred things up a bit, we started asking around about the guy who had tapped into his airbending skills. The right house was a little further away from the main buildings. "Hold on a second. Don't just barge in without knocking," I said, pulling Aang back as he was about to burst through the door. He's supposed to be an adult, but it seems like he's still lacking some common sense. "Oh man, I'm sorry. I'm just super excited," the Avatar said, a bit awkwardly, as he used airbending to straighten out his clothes. Looks like we were chatting a bit too loudly because the door swung open not long after. A middle-aged guy, a bit shorter than most and sporting a small belly, stood at the door, looking at us, two strangers, with a tense question in his eyes. You could get why there was some tension. The village was tiny, and the folks living there probably weren't used to seeing new faces around. So there I was, just an ordinary farmer, and one of them flashed this overly cheerful smile my way. Meanwhile, the other one had this impressive physique that definitely made me feel a bit cautious. "That's me. What do you need?" he asked, his words coming out a bit shaky. "We need you," Aang said, pointing at him, which made our friend turn pale in an instant. "What a guy you are, Aang," I said softly, struggling to find anything else to say. "We're airbenders," I said quietly, nudging Aang behind me, because, knowing him, he'd probably try something crazy. "Sorry for dropping by unannounced, but we need to talk about the new airbenders. Mind letting us in? We can chat about it all inside." "Okay," the man said, keeping a cautious eye on Aang. The inside of the house was pretty average, and honestly, that made me happy. It showed that our work with Lao actually paid off. Can you believe that just 5 years ago, farming was seen as the least profitable job out there? Maybe that's why there was such a pull towards banditry and piracy. Families needed to eat somehow. It seems like the family was getting ready for lunch, and the smells wafting through the house were tempting. And that's how it went down. The rest of the family was waiting in the roomy kitchen dining area. The man's wife was such a lovely woman, still beautiful even after having 3 kids. Next to her was the youngest, a little boy who looked to be around 2 years old. Then there was the middle son, and sitting at the end of the table was a girl who was sure to blossom into a real beauty. "We have some guests," the wife had noticed us already, but the silence felt a bit tense. "So, let's kick things off with some introductions. I'm Kuan," the kids chimed in after him, and then we heard Kuan's wife speak up. "I'm Yo, an airbender, and this is Aang, the current avatar." Kuan finally relaxed his gaze from Aang after hearing those words. We spent a full 15 minutes just enjoying the meal. Honestly, it had been quite some time since I enjoyed such comforting and homey food. Wan and Roku enjoyed all their meals in palaces, where famous chefs whipped up delicious dishes for them. I'll be honest, the food is tasty there, but it just doesn't feel personal or cozy at all. The mom whipped up a meal for her kids, pouring her love into every dish. Naruto gets meals like that sometimes, especially since her mom and Kaya are around, but not as often as she'd want. I'm just your average cook, and even with all the practice I've put in, my skills are still at the point of being edible, won't poison you. Gaia and Drea don't need food, and Daisy and Sheikah can manage without it as well. Sheikah loves experimenting with different flavors. I remember one time I caught her munching on some super spicy peppers. Her go-to food source is definitely her older sister. "Could you show us your airbending?" Aang asked in a more relaxed tone after the tea was served. "I'll give it a shot," Kuan said, a bit unsure. He shut his eyes and started to concentrate. A little breeze started to swirl around him after a few seconds. "Great." Aang almost leapt up from the table, his sudden movement snapping Kuan out of his focus. The breeze sent the avatar's teacup tumbling onto his leg. "Ouch, hot, hot." Aang started dancing around funnily, making everyone burst into laughter like kids again. "What's going on with this?" Kuan asked. "There aren't many airbenders around, so we're happy to welcome every new brother. Don't you think it would be awesome to learn how to control one of the elements?" After sharing a look with his wife, Kuan finally spoke up. "Honestly, I'm pretty happy with everything in my life right now, and training would just take up more time. I have a family to think about." "I get it," I said, quickly putting my hand over Aang's mouth, because knowing him, he was about to say something else. How about we take a look at your kids? Who knows, some of them might just be future airbenders. Sure thing, he said right away, wanting to keep all options open for his kids. With a serious look at Aang, he emphasized that self-control was important. As I was checking out Kuan's kids, Aang leaned in and whispered something to Kuan, probably knowing I could hear him just fine, or maybe he just forgot about that. Wow, all three of them are airbenders. I said to myself. If it weren't for future breakthroughs, his kids would have found their gift when they got older. So, it's likely that it will start to awaken in them in about 2 or maybe 3 years. Mr. Kuan, I've got some great news for you. I just couldn't let this pass by. So, there's this cool fund called Air Revival. Basically, every airbender gets a nice chunk of change every 3 months, no strings attached. It's a pretty decent amount. And for you, since all your kids are going to be airbenders, you can just multiply that amount by 4. Aang was over the moon, while Kuan's family was still coming to terms with the amazing news. Are there any requirements? Kuan asked, clearly picking up on the situation. Absolutely. The key thing here is airbending training. Regardless of your natural talent, you'll need to set aside a few hours each week to get the hang of it. At first, Aang and I will come by to help you get started, so you can continue on your own afterward. No rush. Tomorrow, you'll get a copy of the document to check out all the details yourself. It seems like Kuan probably won't reach master status, but his kids definitely have a shot at becoming true air nomads. What a stroke of luck, the guy surely had some airbending ancestors in his family tree. Take some time to think about it. With the money you'll get, you can bring in new workers to take care of all the heavy lifting. That way, you can enjoy more time with your family. Sounds good, right? It was obvious that Kuan's wife appreciated the last words. We'll bring the documents ourselves tomorrow, Aang chimed in quickly. We headed out with some little gifts, and Kuan's wife caught on to how eagerly I was enjoying my food, the Fire Nation. The Fire Lord's Palace. Inside the grand walls of the country's main building, there was always a lot going on. The lives of thousands were shaped here, and all sorts of intrigues were unfolding. But those things happened quietly and not very often, since there had been whispers around the palace for ages that Crown Prince Zuko seemed to have ears everywhere, even in the tiniest corners. Out of nowhere, the huge entrance doors flew open, knocking the nearby guards right off their feet. All eyes quickly turned to the intruder, with everyone curious to catch a glimpse of the bold individual who had the nerve to step into this sacred place for the Fire Nation in such a flashy way. In front of them was the perfect mix of strength, grace, and charm. Her blonde hair, which you don't see every day around here, looked like it was glowing, almost like the sun. Her serpentine eyes had these vertical slits that seemed to look right into your soul, making it impossible for anyone to hold eye contact for even a moment. Her slightly pointed ears, striking figure, and towering height completed the picture. Her presence was so powerful that it made everyone just hold back their angry speeches they had ready to go. Before long, her steady footsteps echoed down the corridor, and everyone in her way instinctively moved aside. Dad, I'm on my way, Anya thought, curious about how he would react. Honestly, she had always dreamed of having a more human body. She had missed out on so many joyful moments just because of her enormous size. Luckily, the blood memory showed that transformation was definitely within reach. Yeah, it definitely took a lot of work because changing form could only happen after what they called the awakening. This is when a dragon becomes an adult, which occurs once they fully absorb their blood memory and reach a certain level of Kai. That's why she spent all her time fighting and then taking breaks. A lot of her ancestors' memories were all about battles. So, in between those fights, she soaked up the energy from the local star, which helped boost her bending channels and source. She definitely has a lot to be proud of, that's for sure. It's interesting how many dragons don't wake up until they've been around for 100 years. Everything would be fine, but she still feels uneasy about tight basement and semi-basement spaces. Childhood traumas stick around. They don't just fade away. She had been getting ready for this day for quite a while. So, she and Daisy took a few days to pick out just the right dress. Daisy has an amazing sense of style. For years, her dad has been rocking outfits that she's made just for him. It looks like his decision is influenced by the fact that regular fabric just can't handle his bending training anymore. That's why he used to stock up on a whole room full of different clothes. He wanted to make sure he wouldn't end up caught with his bare behind at any time. Daisy has gotten the hang of making these amazing, memorable garments. Even if just a little bit of fabric is left, it seems to want to go back to how it was originally made. It's fueled by life energy, and since the cost is so low, you hardly even notice the outflow. Right now, she's rocking a dress that's made from this awesome plant-based material. It only took us about 5 minutes to get to the throne room. She just brushed off the guards who were trying to say something and pushed the massive doors open. In the blink of an eye, there was this huge crash as something big and heavy slammed into something else. I misjudged my strength again, she thought, feeling a bit embarrassed as she tucked her hands behind her back. There, she found herself looking into the narrowed gaze of golden eyes, strikingly similar to her own, just without the vertical slit. We had a staring contest that went on for a whole minute. Azula knew exactly who was in front of her, but she wasn't about to let them see any sign of weakness by looking away first. Anya nodded to herself in satisfaction, closing her eyes, thinking, just as I expected from the royal family. It was only when she felt a connection with the ancient spirits that she truly understood how strong Azula's dragon blood still was. Sometimes, members of her kind would show an interest in humans, leading to some individuals developing a real knack for bending. So, it turns out that the ancestors of one of her dad's wives had made an effort to hold on to their past glory. Anya, her father's gentle voice broke into her thoughts. Without any more doubts, she hurried over Zuko to enjoy his embrace. So, how long have you been able to take on a human form? It's been about a week now, she said with a hint of shyness, finally coming to terms with the fact that she had taken her time getting ready. Wow, you've made some waves, Azula said, shaking her head. At that moment, a third observer showed up next to her, and she had to work hard to keep them calm. You don't see an unknown figure with such incredible bending power just walking through the palace every day. Oh, it's no big deal, just a little lesson for them, Zuko said, brushing it off. You know, at the smallest thing, they just come rushing to us like we're meant to wipe their noses, he said, fully aware that Anya's calm presence was something most people just couldn't deal with. But every day, the palace was buzzing with a bunch of benders who could put up at least a bit of a fight. There's nothing urgent, let's go, Zuko said as he took Anya's hand and led her to the ruler's private quarters, which were right behind the throne. Anya thought with happiness, this is exactly what I've wanted all along. Being near someone else made her feel a lot of new things, since the human body is much more sensitive. Even though she lost around 30% of her bending power in this shape, it was certainly worth it. The realm of spirits, one of the biggest places where light spirits live. Naruto in the 93rd year after the air nomads were killed, I had previously been to this strange place where all the different climate zones worked together. I could only feel the energy of a few old spirits at that time, the ice and fire phoenixes. There are actually a lot more here. It's hardly surprising that an old spirit lives on top of each of the 12 mountains in this area, as it naturally produces a lot of different types of bending energy. One of these mountains is home to the Great Master of Air Currents. 50 kilometers away, dark spirits are coming closer. They'll be here in less than an hour, Wong said in a very serious voice. We hadn't had a chance to talk and remember past times because he had been on reconnaissance missions. Based on what I can see, there are definitely more than 6 or even 7 ancient spirits among them, he said with a sad tone. I made a mistake, Wan Shi Tong said, bowing his head a little. I should have known that everything they did was for a reason. Quote, the evil spirits hadn't caused any difficulty in the last few years. They were happy with the territories they had taken over. They had been guided by other ancient spirits all along, who were getting ready for a big attack on these areas. If this settlement were to be taken, the number of new dark spirits that appeared would go up a lot. There was no way to retreat. The Fire Phoenix shook his huge head and said, we all missed the threat. It's impossible to say who would be stronger right now, Agni or this entity, whose name I still don't know. But with so much support, I'm feeling more sure that we will win, he said, looking at Drea, Anya, and me with appreciation. We all got ready for war for an hour. Weak spirits went further into the area. I didn't worry about Anya and Drea. They had shown in real life that they could save their own lives. The second one had almost caught up with me in terms of both the quality and amount of Kai. I thought with a trace of jealousy, it seems dragons in every world have immeasurable power. I could already hear the noises of millions of spirits coming. The next 12 hours all came together in my mind as one picture, and I had to keep concentrated the whole time. There were fewer old spirits on the enemy side, but it didn't make the combat any easier because they could bend things in a very bad way. In some way, I ended up facing a spirit that ruled over deterioration. This annoying enemy just rotted my water-based attacks, so I had to resort to using my fists. I lost track of how many times I had to rejuvenate my skin by the second hour. Luckily, his strikes never hurt my internal organs. Mid-level and higher spirits were used as cannon fodder because a single attack from an ancient spirit could easily kill a dozen of them. We tried our best to safeguard our own, but it wasn't going well. Every time you blocked a strike from a group of light spirits, your enemy would tell you that they were there. Maybe it was then that I understood that even mid-level spirits, whose acts were still guided by instinct, could be strong enough to stand to the end. We were able to shift the battlefield farther away from the settlement over time, which allowed us to use our bending strengths to their utmost. To be honest, if the dark spirits had worked together even a little bit more, we would have been in a lot more trouble. There wasn't even a suggestion of friendship on their side. In the 8th hour of a fierce struggle, the phoenixes almost killed an old spirit, but it was eaten right away by its teammate. This is a great example. At some point, my other bodies entered the fight, which made it even more likely that we would win. The Kai source developed like yeast, and spirits of fire, earth, water, and air died here and there. It's bad that none of the old people were there. A higher soul that had survived this meat grinder shouted with excitement, "They're retreating." No one meant to go after the other ghosts. If you catch an ancient spirit, you can be sure to get a present after they die. We were happy that we had killed 3 ancients and a lot of weaker spirits. I think this loss will make them eat less, I said quietly, still holding the Kai crystal tightly in my right palm. A hippopotamus-like spirit I didn't know said, "They'll definitely keep a lower profile for a few years." I looked at Drea and Anya and said, "The girls did well." They appeared tired, but there were no signs of major injury. The Southern Water Tribe, Naruto. The South Pole looked different. The new metropolis, which Sokka and other Southerners developed, showed how much heart they put into the endeavor. The native people would go around with big smiles on their faces for a long time since they had not only saved their home but also brought it back to its former grandeur. The streets were a little empty, but in 10 years, it would be impossible to get about. The Southerners painted their ice mansions in different hues to set themselves apart from their northern cousins. Because of this, every day here felt like a celebration. The vivid colors made everything feel so different. People in the South didn't appreciate being dependent on their northern neighbor, at least not in the animated series or some Avatar comics. But after hearing people talk, I knew my anxieties were not true. The palace is worth mentioning. It was built in the traditional style of the water tribes, yet it also fit in with new building styles. The architecture seemed to suggest, we're not forgetting the past, but we're looking to the future. The whole thing was made up of terraces with plenty of domes and turrets. I told my friends Katara and Yui, now the palace of the Northern Water Tribe seems like a joke. Not even the palace of the Earth King and the Fire Lord would seem as grand here. Katara, whose head was already spinning from all the rooms and hallways, exclaimed, "I didn't know Sokka had gigantism." But just 10% of the rooms were being used at the time. Yui said, "Your brother doesn't leave out any details. Sokka was currently on a mission to find useful minerals. We didn't simply go to the South Pole to visit Sokka. We also wanted to stop bothering our parents, who, even though they didn't want to, had agreed to let me date my little sister." The girls were eager to try the forbidden fruit of sex. "Okay, we'll have time to look at the buildings later. Let's go to our rooms instead," my sister murmured, hugging my left arm. And since Katara discreetly joined her, she didn't mind. I'm all for it. The moral values of me from the former world don't matter much anymore, whether they are good or evil. I don't know if it's because I can bend things or because I still regard my sister as a cartoon character, but the fact is that she loves me and I adore her back. Tribe of Southern Water. The Palace of the Chief. Naruto. After I sent the servant away, I turned to the girls. They were already taking off their clothes, which made them look more naked as time went on. I wasn't far behind. My pants were just too tight in one location. Brother, it was bittersweet to feel the pleasure flowing through our Kai bond, she said, her voice full of emotion. I'm guilty. I couldn't always suppress the thread connecting us when passion peaked. And it hurt even more knowing we wouldn't be able to repeat something like that anytime soon, she added, her words laden with feeling, as she kept undressing. I don't have this Kai bond of yours, Katara said in a low voice, sounding a little jealous. But it still bothered me to see how your relationship with our other sisters changed. Why did I even promise to wait for Yui? She said at the end. I appreciate that, Yui remarked earnestly as she hugged her buddy, who was like a sister to her. Finally, they've made it, I thought. They should have said something a long time ago, but they kept quiet and held it all in. Teenage hormones don't simply mess with boys' minds, they mess with girls' heads too. I'm still astonished they didn't just hurt me during one of our private waterbending lessons. I did it, I said, taking off my clothing and coming closer to them. I could smell the familiar, warm scents right away. I should have moved things along much faster, I whispered, stroking their cheeks and tucking stray hairs behind their ears. Katara laughed and covered her mouth. You're huge. Acid just killed the mood, she said, and my equipment knocked with her leg by accident. I replied, you've both become such beauties, as my eyes hungrily roamed their hot bodies. Both females had breasts that were almost D-cup size, which looked great on their toned, curvy bodies. Their thin waists made their firm, round buttocks look like they needed to be buried in. Their dark skin made them look 100 times sexier. Didn't we look good before? Yui teased, massaging my throbbing manhood with her palm, which made it twitch with excitement. Before, you were a different kind of beautiful, more innocent and cute, I said in a fun tone as I carefully ran my hands over her soft skin. I don't even remember when I started to feel this way about my sister. Maybe as her figure started to fill out, or when our Kai Tai meant more than just love for family. No matter what, the result stays the same. And to be honest, I had been expecting this deep down. I had been putting the correct thoughts in their heads since they were kids. Katara got better later. This time, she felt a different type of pleasure as my shaft filled her belly with my seed and her back channel gripped it securely. Even though the females did everything they could to wear me down, I won. Not bad for people who used to be virgins. They wore me out physically, but my Kai stayed strong. I fell into a beautiful tiredness, feeling like I had done my duty, with the image of their spread openings burned into my consciousness. Fire Nation. The Palace of the Fire Lord. 1. I tried to talk sense into the very beautiful dragoness who had been hunting me for hours. Anya, calm down and control your instincts. My clothes were a little tattered, and a hole in my jeans showed out my heart-covered underwear to all the females in the room, so I didn't look like a counselor at all. By the way, it's custom-made. Who would have thought that Anya would have a strong desire to mate as an adult? Grown-up. Adult. That indicates it's time to have kids, and you have to do it. At least that's what her blood thinks. Luckily, the bad episodes only happen once a day and last between half an hour and 3 hours. Every day, free comedy shows. Azula said with a laugh as she ate berries. Mai and Ty Lee stayed close by, eating fruit, and watched our chase with curiosity. It would be terrible if she attacked everyone who walked by, but dragon females only want the best meat. If the possible father is even a little weaker than the mother, she won't accept him. She can only be with me in both worlds, to be honest. And it's not just because I'm special, though it does play a role. It's just that to generate fresh dragon hatchlings, you need to be a real monster of Kai and spiritual energy. As we all know, ancient spirits don't have any Kai, and there aren't any people with Anya's reserves. So, I had to go away from my adopted daughter. I don't mind getting to know Anya, but right now, it's not her talking. I'll be all with it when she wants to create a connection, but only if my other spouses agree that she is family. If all else fails, I'll convince them. After a lot of love lessons, they become extremely cooperative. To be honest, what saves me is that dragons have babies in a way that is quite similar to how spirits do. After a gorgeous mating dance, they fight in a fun way, pushing against each other and exchanging energy. There is a very small probability that the female will get pregnant from this. This doesn't rule out the human way of fertilization. That's why Anya's thinking is so confused that she doesn't know what to do. This is the finest father candidate, however, he doesn't look like a dragon at all. He won't dance with a woman who is so strong, and he doesn't give off his energy. I said, it's going to be a long day, and then I turned into water to dodge the claws of the angry dragoness who wanted to imprison me in her tower and make me happy for hours. I'd love to read a fairy tale like that. 115 years after the air nomads were killed. Tianhai City. New technology showroom. People were busy inside the mostly glass building, which had a futuristic feel about it. The hot July sun burned their heads, but they didn't seem to care. They were too busy being amazed by the innovators' work. The World New Technology Exhibition took place for the 7th time today. Anyone who thought they had the right to show off their great invention may have a booth in this building if they passed a special committee's test. Every other month in the summer, the number of talented people in Tianhai went beyond anything anyone could have imagined. Some people wanted to show off their innovations to the world to boost their egos. Others looked for buyers who were interested in their work. A lot of young students thought that their DIY projects would get sponsors with just a wave of their hand. Every year during this month, a dozen new businesses open up in the city-state of Tianhai. Too many, maybe, but you should know that the exhibition center only had the best 300 inventions out of thousands that didn't make the cut. Only a small number of people could compete in the market. Because related technologies weren't well developed, an invention found by a smart businessman at the exhibition couldn't be mass-produced. Either thousands of skilled workers would have to make the product by hand, or people would have to wait for others to come up with the missing parts. As expected, most people rallied around this year's dark horse. The size and position of a booth told the people who were there how important an invention was. It's important to remember that the committee members didn't make many mistakes when they ranked people, since they chose people who knew what they were talking about. The sun was almost down when lovely, quiet music started to play. The audience, on the other hand, seemed to go crazy and rushed for the biggest booth. The crowd had no idea what to anticipate from this year's favorite because they were heated up by all the gadgets. A mature and dignified guy with only a few wrinkles around his eyes and no gray hair stated, "Dear friends, I'm happy to welcome you to the 5th annual gathering of brilliant minds." Even though he spoke in a serious tone, he easily got the crowd excited and changed some people's minds. They thought the character would be different because they had observed other scholars. He smiled and said, "This is my 5th time here. Even though my last spots weren't as good." A small group of individuals already knew him well, and he had even taught some of the younger people there how to build ships. Hiroshi Sato was born in the capital of the Fire Nation and devoted his life to science. He graduated from a school that taught shipbuilding when he was a young guy. But at some point, he felt stalled in his growth, like he was having a midlife crisis too soon. Let's be honest. He was driven by ambition, and his soul wanted to make something of his own. So, Hiroshi was one of the first students at Tianhai University and taught shipbuilding, a topic he knew inside and out. He was plainly out of his depth in some areas, which is why he had to feel like a student again. After years of hard labor, they got what they wanted. Can I be a little sentimental? Hiroshi let the crowd down a little because they were looking forward to witnessing his innovation, but no one booed him. He had already shown everyone on the big stage that he had the right to talk freely. "I want to thank everyone who has helped me all this time. My parents are no longer with us, but they gave their last pennies to send their wayward son to the academy," he said, swiftly wiping away a single tear. "I can't say how much I love my wife," he said, looking back at the gorgeous black-haired woman standing there. It was strange to think of her as a woman, even though she and Hiroshi weren't that far apart in age. "And I haven't forgotten about you, colleagues." He waved to the front rows, where other professors and scientists were sitting in a different area. After a short speech, Hiroshi Sato respectfully ripped the cloth off of a huge thing. He couldn't help but shout, "I present to you, the Satomobile." Thousands of people saw an unusual but beautiful carriage with a large nose. Hiroshi's pals had already seen this vehicle, so they knew how serious the situation was. Applause quickly spread around the hall, starting in the front seats. Hiroshi was, in a way, moving from one time period to another. Once, Ships needed rowers. Hiroshi went on. Now it's time to replace pack animals. The Satomobile will let you travel comfortably around the city. Those who read between the lines knew that the Satomobile would be useless outside of the city, where there were no good roads. Compared to animals, which need constant care, the Satomobile needs very little maintenance. And again, some heard much more. Many could handle animals, but if something broke in the Satomobile, little could be done without a specialist. The Satomobile has an internal combustion engine. Hiroshi then started listing off words and features. People began to respect the speaker more and more for some reason. A huge amount of effort had been put in. He may have taken certain ideas and rules from other people, but all he did was legal. Why make something unique when you can just pay to take someone else's ideas? The talk went over well. There were definitely some who didn't enjoy this way of getting about. For instance, those who sell pack animals to make money. Sadly, they were powerless. Someone else would have to drive advancement if he didn't. People, who had previously been through a lot, knew better. After all, many industries had changed how they made things in the last 10 years, which is why the Tianhai administration had to slow down such a big jump. If things had been different, thousands would have lost their jobs. A smoother transition allowed people time to learn new skills. Tell headquarters everything you've heard here, one man whispered to another. His friend just nodded a little and then disappeared into the mob. What's the leader going to do? The Sato family home. Hiroshi asked me to dinner today to celebrate the opening of the Industry of the Future Vehicle Manufacturing Company. Hiroshi is the executive director, and I am the only sponsor. Honestly, I've been watching Hiroshi for a long time. When I heard a name I knew from the animated series, my ears perked up. From what I can tell, the canon lines up in a somewhat selective way. Hiroshi and many other important characters were born in different years, some sooner and others later. But the truth is that these people mostly follow the same script. Yakwon, my little prodigy. I guess I got a bit too relaxed. It seems like he might be heading in the wrong direction, if he hasn't done so already. You know, I can't shake the feeling that the quiet in the criminal world has something to do with him. I pushed those thoughts aside and concentrated on the amazing cooking of Hiroshi's wife, Yasuoko, who, by the way, was also quite ahead of her time. Great cooking and such a caring nature. Looks like I haven't overlooked a thing. I started to compliment Yasuoko. And she's just gorgeous, Hiroshi said, a little buzzed. Wow, she's wise for her age, I thought. Yasuoko and Hiroshi actually started dating way before Yasuoko hit it big with his inventions. From what I understand, he showed up in Tianhai with almost no money to his name. All those experiments he was running back in the Fire Nation drained his funds. She kind of saw the future general in the sergeant. She kind of helped shape the Hiroshi Sato we see today. Even though she appeared to be just a regular clothing store consultant. I can still picture that day so clearly. Hiroshi had forgotten he'd shared the story of meeting his wife before, but honestly, I didn't mind hearing it once more. It was the first time I treated myself to an official suit, but when I saw Yasuoko, I just blanked out completely. You were adorable, all red-faced and stumbling over your words. His wife chuckled teasingly. Little Asami is starting to wake up, I thought to myself. I didn't want to break up their sweet moment, but come on, a 2-year-old isn't exactly a reason to keep quiet. I'll be fast, she's likely hungry. Before long, another member of the Sato family came over to join us at the table. The little one looked at me with her curious light green eyes. They actually let me hold the girl, and Asami seemed fine with it. She kept making these funny faces at me. It's kind of wild to think this little girl will grow up to be a femme fatale one day, but when you look at her mom, it all makes sense. I was just getting ready to say goodbye to the Sato family when I felt some unfamiliar intelligent beings, including Kai blockers, coming up fast to the estate. This group probably isn't up to anything good. I had a feeling something was off about that attack and robbery in the animated series. It seemed like someone was trying to make Hiroshi Sato, a brilliant inventor, mechanic, and businessman, turn against Benders. Are the Equalists showing up early as well? So frustrating. It's frustrating that people seem to want to go back to the old canon. I think it's a bit early to make any conclusions. I need to chat with these guys first. I think you and your family should consider moving to the new mansion a little sooner. There's going to be so much more space, and you'll be able to fit in even more guards. What's happening? Hiroshi suddenly became serious. Looks like you've already grabbed someone's attention. Someone is hanging around the house. Can your Benders take care of it? The head of the family asked with a serious tone. Sure thing. I said right away. I've always been the type to look out for my close ones, and over time, Hiroshi and his family have become a part of that group. I handpicked all the benders who signed long-term contracts to protect the Sato family. Sure, I could handle the attackers on my own, but I wanted to see how the guards would hold up in an actual fight. Also, nobody has any idea that I'm here with them right now. Asami, it's all good. Yasuoko started to comfort her daughter. Wow, outside the house, things are intense. That recent explosion was so powerful that it even made the windows rattle. I'll go check things out, I said as I got up quickly. Once the enemies figured out they weren't going to win this battle, they started to pull back smartly. But our benders weren't having any of it, and that's when things started to get weird. Rather than giving up or continuing to fight, a few of them began to die. As the wind picked up, I suddenly found myself on the battlefield, and just like that, all the enemies dropped unconscious. I've got this, I said to the firebender, who was kind of the go-to leader among the benders we had on contract. Come on, get up, I nudged one of them. The attacker's flashy suit gave off vibes of a connection to the criminal world. It was clear they had a thing for colorful official and semi-official outfits. Damn! He exclaimed when he saw my face. Senator and airbending master, come on, isn't it a bit late to act like you don't know what's going on? Cough cough, he said, struggling to breathe as the air seemed to vanish from his lungs. I get it. He breathed out. So, our group got this order to rob the Sato family. The new king of the criminal world, he said, grimacing like he just bit into a sour lemon, doesn't take no for an answer. So, we had to go. His eyes were all over the place, clearly not thrilled about this mission. Well, the Sato family isn't exactly struggling, there's a lot to take advantage of. Then it was time to question his accomplices. One of them was a planted agent. This same unknown leader had given him the order to kill Hiroshi's wife. Things are getting intriguing, and the best part, nobody has a clue what the leader looks like. So, all we know is that he's linked to these folks they refer to as mask wearers, who are part of that second group hanging out with the bandits. It's definitely the Equalists, I muttered to myself, remembering that in the series, they also sported those similar protective suits. Also, not a single one of them was a bender, but you could definitely see that they had been working on certain muscles, which made it clear they were into Kai blocking techniques. Things didn't go too smoothly during the interrogation with them either. We fight for the rights of everyday folks, and this Equalist just took his own life. At first, things were going pretty smoothly, but then he figured out there was no way out, and something just clicked in his head. Suddenly, he kept saying the same thing over and over. At the same time, his body started to fall apart, almost like he had told it to just break down. No matter how much I tried to heal him, he just kept falling apart again. No way, this can't be happening, I said, shaking my head in disbelief. It kind of reminds me of the soft implants that all the government officials in Tianhai go through. It looks like they've hit their limit here. It seems like criminal groups don't get the full picture, they're more like pawns in the game. Members of the organization are shielded from being questioned. I'm not an expert in brainwashing or anything, but I've picked up a thing or two from my experience with soft implants. So, I'd say that if someone doesn't fully agree with certain ideas, their subconscious is likely to push back against those tough beliefs that go against their basic instinct to survive. It's still brilliant. Seems like there are spies in the government too. Looks like a dull week of checks is ahead. The Sato family needs to beef up their security. It's the police headquarters. We're talking about the sub-basement level here. Just a few meters underground, there are these huge open spaces that could easily fit half the entire police station all at once. Everything that law enforcement officers need to stay in great shape was right here. Sturdy walls and ceilings that could handle some serious bending techniques, treadmills, different frames for strength training, bars and pull-up bars, dumbbells, and kettlebells. It seems like you just can't find any complete sports and gym equipment anywhere these days. The training hall was pretty much empty since it was the busiest time of day, and the officers were tied up with their main responsibilities. You could mostly hear just the sound of air being sliced and something heavy crashing into something else. Over in the western part of the room, you'll find arenas, punching bags, and all sorts of gear perfect for sharpening those martial arts and bending skills. So, that's the source of all those thuds and whistles. The chief of police in Tianhai City was over there, skillfully working out with a big, heavy-looking punching bag. The girl, since 26 is just the start of being an adult, who recently took on the task of keeping things in check in the city, had an undeniably strong body. Most male officers seemed to think it was way too powerful. They probably just felt a bit insecure. She stood tall, her muscles defined and strong, showcasing her skill in earthbending. With ease, she seemed to challenge the fragile male ego, stirring up feelings of envy and dislike among the men around her. Luckily, they managed to keep their personal feelings separate from their work. You know, it's interesting to point out that Kuvira, which is the name of the new police chief, had a bit of a masculine build. You could see it in her broad shoulders and her moderately deep voice. But that didn't take away from her exotic beauty, which is pretty rare in this world. For ages, it's been all about those fragile, delicate-looking girls around here, so spotting something different is always a nice surprise. Maybe that's why a few lower-ranking officers were always hanging around her, but none of them had ever managed to win over Kuvira's tough heart. Kuvira was so deep in her thoughts that she completely missed the way her subordinates were casting bold glances at her. And there was definitely something to see. Her large, firm breasts looked like they might pop right through the thin fabric of her white tank top at any moment. Just so you know, the light shirt had been damp with sweat for a while, which made the outlines of her large nipples pretty noticeable. Every time she threw a punch at the bag, her upper chest playfully bounced, catching the attention of 3 guys who ditched their fake workouts just to admire her beauty. Her round, enticing backside, snugly fitting in those green training pants, definitely caught the eye. Kuvira was aware of the men's stares, but she didn't have time to deal with that right now. Anyway, from what she understood, these guys always seemed to do their jobs just right. What about the stares? She was able to put up with them. This wasn't the first time around. Well, they wouldn't gain anything from it. The delicate and tender heart of such a strong-looking woman had already been taken by one man for quite some time. It might sound a bit crazy, but she actually met her soulmate when she was only 6 years old. Some might chuckle and wonder if a little girl could confuse her emotions with such deep feelings. No, back then, the grown man was her only support. Like an older brother or maybe even a father figure. But definitely not someone she loved. Years went by, but the memory of Roku, her hero, stayed with her, right in her heart, too. At the most crucial point in her life, when her parents turned their backs on her and left her out on the streets, he showed up. She spent 3 whole months traveling with Roku, and during that time, they looked for other abandoned children who needed help. That's when she figured out that her parents had never loved her. The indifferent looks she had thought were signs of affection and their cold behavior she had just accepted as normal suddenly made sense. But when a harsh drought hit their province, they figured it was time to let go of the extra mouth to feed. It stung and was quite uncomfortable. She had never shed so many tears in her life. But you know, if things had played out differently, she might never have crossed paths with Roku. That Roku, who in just 3 months, provided her with more warmth than her biological parents ever did. The memories from those days would keep her spirit warm for years, helping her get through even the toughest times. After exploring the whole province, Roku dropped her off at one of the famous academies, where they taught both earthbending and regular sciences. If someone couldn't bend, the attention shifted to the other aspects. Luckily, she went along with the bender's curriculum. The academy's administration offered students the option to live on campus all year round for an extra fee. It wasn't until later that she would realize just how much Roku had spent to give a handful of strangers a decent education and a safe place to eat and sleep. As time went by, the little girl who always yearned for Roku's voice stepped out of the academy, now a confident and strong adult conqueror. After graduating with flying colors, she found herself without her private room and the luxury of 3 free meals a day, so she chose to start working. Luckily, with her impressive bending skills and knowledge, she had a lot of options ahead of her. She decided to guard trade caravans because the pay was solid, she didn't have to stress about food or a place to stay, and it gave her a chance to put her bending skills to the test. She couldn't help but feel a bit embarrassed that she still hadn't picked up cooking skills. One caravan was swapped out for another, and then yet another, in a never-ending loop. At one point, she landed a job as the head of security for a well-known circus in the Earth Kingdom. There, she found her other passion. The first one was definitely bending, but the second ended up being dancing. She even decided to extend her contract so she could join in on several more performances with other dancers. Every day was packed with all sorts of little and big happenings, but her mind kept circling back to one person. Once the nations started coming together, she got the chance to visit the Fire Nation, where she had a quick encounter with the esteemed advisor Juan. At that moment, something in her heart did a little flip. Her mind was convinced she was looking at someone entirely new, but her heart had a different story to tell. Not grasping her emotions, she set off to keep exploring the world. Her next stop was the Northern Water Tribe, a place that felt like it was stuck in eternal winter. She was taken in by the local beauty for ages. Who would have thought such a stunning city could come from just ice? She dedicated a whole week to diving into the pristine white wonders, all while making sure to take care of her injuries. She had been hurt more than a few times, and some of those injuries held her back from enjoying life to the fullest. On the final day, she spotted the young chief Naruto hanging out with her big family. Once more, she found herself flooded with those familiar feelings that always came up when she thought about her benefactor, Roku. Once might be a coincidence, but twice? Her body definitely wasn't lying. She decided to head over to Omashu to see if the rumors were true about a new Earth King being elected. Apparently, it was the famous Roku. With her impressive resume and her skillful earthbending that she practiced every weekday, she was quickly welcomed into the city's garrison. Throughout her years of service, she encountered him time and again. She still hadn't quite figured out what Roku meant to her, but there was no doubt he was the closest person in her life. Every night, she found herself blaming her indecisiveness. What would it have taken to just walk up to him and strike up a chat? Maybe he just hadn't forgotten her at all. You know, the more she saw Roku, the more he reminded her of Wan and Naruto. She had no idea what kind of Kai Roku was tapping into, but if that was the situation, she figured it was best to keep quiet. It was pretty obvious to her colleagues that whenever the ruler of their city showed up, Kuvira would do her best to shrink away or even find a place to hide. There were all sorts of encouragements coming in, and a lot of people understood what she was feeling. Roku just had this way about him that made everyone respect him, and if you heard the stories from those who saw him in action, that respect turned into something even deeper. I'll talk to him once I'm the city's chief of security, she told herself each month, convinced that next time would be the moment. Even though she's an amazing professional in her field, a fierce competitor on the battlefield, and has an incredibly sharp mind, she stumbled when it came to the thing that kept her up at night. So, she missed her chance. Roku ended up moving to Ba Sing Se. She no longer felt the pressure to show off her metal bending skills. In the end, she thought that by mastering metals, she could find a way to connect with him better. She spent an entire week feeling off, but then she got herself back on track and promised herself she wouldn't let another opportunity for love slip by. After all those years, she finally felt ready to share her whole life with him. Once she settled in Ba Sing Se, she faced a bunch of challenges. There were some talented folks around here, all trying their best to land a job in the palace. Even after 2 years, she still hadn't quite made it to the upper ring. Sure, being the chief of police in the middle ring sounds pretty impressive, but it didn't get her any closer to what she truly wanted. So, the news about Tianhai City popped up. Right off the bat, I noticed 3 names on the list of folks who gave the thumbs up for the city's construction, and guess what? They were all linked to the same person. She packed up her few things and handed in her resignation before heading off to Tianhai. It was a bit of a bummer that Roku, just like his other personas, didn't make it to the city very often. So, another one? Kuvira said, clearly taken aback, but just to herself. You know, she happened to spot one of the last airbenders, yo. I've heard that as women get older, their intuition just gets sharper and sharper. To get a clear answer, you'd need tons of girls and a bunch of stats, but when it comes to Kuvira, you can definitely say, her instincts are getting spot on. She felt a spark of hope again, but fear had taken hold of her, becoming a part of who she was. Well, it's not surprising that she hasn't made a move on the person she likes, sticking to just watching from afar. Time flew by, and before she realized it, she had become the chief of police. At all times, they had to put her in charge just a month before the new technologies exhibition. She was fully aware that after this event, a surge of kidnappings, murders, and other terrible things would come next. For months, they needed to look out for certain scientists and inventors who were facing some serious challenges. This year has taken a turn for the worse. There were folks in matching protective suits teaming up with some bandit groups to pull off a series of attacks, almost like a chaotic marathon. The most frustrating thing was that they were actually keeping up with her officers, who were well trained and equipped with all sorts of cool new tech. Her office was stacked with reports on kidnappings, murders, and a bunch of complaints about how the police were doing. Not many realized that some of her team hadn't caught a wink of sleep for days, all to keep up with the calls. She had been on stimulants for 2 days now, since, apart from handling paperwork, she was the strongest combat unit around. Looks like it's calmed down a bit, Kuvira thought, giving the punching bag one final hit that sent it flying. A good old-fashioned brawl was just what she needed to keep those negative emotions at bay. Unfortunately, she couldn't torment her subordinates at the moment. They needed to be at their best. "Chief, we've got an attack happening at the Future Industries factory," a young sergeant called out, stopping her in her tracks as she headed toward the shower rooms. Kuvira gave a little wave of her hand, and just like that, the door of the metal locker swung open, sending her police uniform flying out. The metallic fibers woven into the fabric let her get dressed in just seconds. Then, some metallic and dangerous objects came out of the locker, smoothly circling her body. She didn't have to say a word. The other guys in the room, who just moments before were lost in the visuals, were already in action, completely unfazed by the captivating sway of Kuvira's hips as she moved ahead. "They've been looked into," Kuvira said to herself, giving a little nod as she tightened her grip on her right hand. That's where one of the new group's members, a pro with electric batons, had struck her last time. Back then, she did try to keep their group safe, but now she wasn't about to give them another shot. Stay tuned for more. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this video. I'm thrilled you watched the video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe for even more exciting content coming your way soon.